Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning everybody. Okay, so today we will be taking, it's called the dog to the ascetic. It's quite an interesting story about the way of life of some of the ascetics. In India during Buddha's time. Okay, this is number 57 in the Majjhima Nikaya, and it begins on page 493. Okay, so when the sutta begins, the Buddha is living in the Kolian country, where there was a town of the Kolians named Halita-Vasana. Yeah, the Kolian country would have been just to the southwest of the Sakyan country. That's the Buddha's own birthplace, was the Sakyan country. And so the Kolians was actually the state from which his mother came. And so the two states were neighbors. They were just divided by a river, I think it's called the River Rohini. And so if you remember the story, you know of the story that about the war that was to break out between two neighboring states over the waters of the river. The war was to be between the Sakyans, those were the people from which the Buddha was descended on his father's side, and the Kolians were the people from which he was descended on his mother's side. Okay, now at that time there was living in the Kolian country two ascetics, one named Puna and the other named Sanya. And the ascetic named Puna was practicing what is called, he was observing the ox duty, so they call him an ox duty ascetic. And his companion named Sanya was what is called the naked dog duty ascetic. We'll find out what it means to be an ox ascetic and a dog ascetic in the next paragraph, or a few paragraphs down. Actually, it's the same paragraph. Okay, so Puna comes to the Buddha and he pays homage to the Blessed One. Maybe because he's a Kolian, so he's perhaps even in some way related to the Buddha through the Buddha's mother. Whereas Sanya, a little more distant, he just exchanges greetings with the Buddha and then sits down on one side and he curls up like a dog. Okay, then Puna is going to explain their practice. And so Puna says that here the Sanya is a naked dog duty ascetic who does what is hard to do. He eats his food when it is thrown to the ground, and he has long taken up and practiced the dog duty ascetic. So the dog duty asceticism means that one makes a vow to live like a dog, to practice like a dog. So one goes about naked. When one walks on all fours, the legs and the hands. Probably when he sees visitors coming close to the place where he's living, he might bark rather than talk to them. And he'll only accept the food if it's thrown on the ground. So I think practices like this were going on in India, even perhaps they're still going on today. Did you see anybody when you went to India a few months ago? Did you see anybody practicing like this?
Like this.
I have a vague recollection, it might be wrong, but vaguely when I was in India in 1975, going from India into Lumbini, the Buddha's birthplace. We were waiting at a bus stop. And if I remember correctly, there came an ascetic walking down the streets, naked, on all fours, standing outside the shops, waiting for the shop owners to give him some food. So these practices go on in the kind of unbroken lineage, 2,500 years, maybe longer. Okay, so Buddha is asking about Sanya, who's practicing the dog duty instead of asceticism. I guess I'm correct. Okay, Buddha asked, what will be his destination? What will be his future course? So why do they take up these practices? Do they enjoy behaving like a dog or like an ox? What is the reason? Doesn't it seem crazy to us? You know, we want to go someplace, we get in the car, drive. We want to eat something, we go to a restaurant or cook something at home. What's the reason of subjecting oneself to such hardships?
Does it have anything to do with anatta, with non-self, being clear that you're not just an ego, you're just something?
Well, the not-self is the Buddha's teaching, and these are not followers of the Buddha.
I would think there would be some misguided notion that doing such ascetic practices, whether it's the naked hairy ascetic or the dog duty or the upright duty, or there's all these weirdo ascetics, it's probably to secure a good rebirth. One would think. I haven't read anything explicitly that says the reason why, but that seemed to have been the goal.
Yeah, I think it could probably be with the idea that they will get a good rebirth, or rebirth in a heavenly world. In fact, there's a view that's expressed in some of the suttas. I don't recall if it comes in the Majjhima Nikaya. By this, vata means, what's translated duty here, which is not very accurate. Vata means a kind of behavior, an ascetic behavior that one undertakes by making a vow, by this practice, by this duty, by this asceticism, by this kind of spiritual life. I will be reborn as a deity, a deva, or even as a very powerful deity. So they think by doing this they will be gaining a lot of merit, wholesome karma, good karma, wearing away the kind of desires that bind them to the human realm, and then they'll be reborn in the heavenly realms and become a powerful deity. So this Buddha asks, what's going to happen to Sanya as a result of following this ascetic practice? But the Buddha says, enough, Puna, don't ask me that. Okay, so but Puna, he's not discouraged. He asks a second time, the third time. And then since he asked the third time, when somebody makes a request to the Buddha 3 times, generally he can't refuse it. He has to agree to it. So the Buddha says to Puna, he says, since I can't persuade you when I say, don't ask me that, I have to answer you. Then he goes on and he says, here, when somebody develops the dog duty fully and uninterruptedly, he develops the dog habit or dog practice fully and uninterruptedly. He develops the mind of a dog fully and uninterruptedly. he develops the behavior of a dog fully and uninterruptedly. On the dissolution of the body after death, the answer is on the next page. I haven't turned the page yet. I don't know. What do you think is going to happen to him?
He will be reborn as a dog, and that's only if he practices properly. If he doesn't practice properly, he'll end up in a nasty hell realm.
Okay, that's good. If he cheats with the dog practice, maybe if he occasionally gets up and walks around and goes to a restaurant from and puts on a full set of clothes, maybe he won't be reborn as a dog, but as a human being. But if he really keeps it up as a dog, then he's going to be reborn in the company of dogs. But if he has such a view as this, this is the passage I was thinking of. By this virtue or observance or asceticism or holy life, I shall become a great, a powerful God or some lesser deity, then that is wrong view in his case. And for one, this wrong view, the Buddha says, there are two destinations. That is a rebirth in hell or the animal realm. So if his dog duty succeeds, it will lead him to the company of dogs. But if it fails, it will lead him to hell. I have to say this seems sometimes a bit strong for my taste. If he's just behaving like a dog, just minding his own business, acting just, he's the one who's in a way suffering here and now by acting strangely, and people make fun of him and treat him, ridicule him, and he has a hard time getting food. Doesn't it seem a little strong to be saying that he'll go to hell because of that?
Well, in a sense, one can already say he is in hell, or he is living the life of a dog. He is living on the animal level, right here and now.
Yeah, so that seems to create in him a natural affinity to the animal realm.
But I think that you could look at it two ways. You could look at it in terms of a literal rebirth, but one could also look at the person now and say, you are essentially a dog. You are living in the animal realm, and you are living in a sense in a hell realm. It's a really unpleasant existence. It's both. And the Buddha was never shy about telling it like it is.
I suspect it has something to do with the asceticism of dishonor. Quite a book called The Shape of Ancient Thought about relations between Greek and Indian and such.
What is the name of the book?
Yeah. Let me read you a little passage. It says, the tradition...
The name of the book, please?
It's called The Shape of Ancient Thought by Thomas McGavin. I don't know how to turn this on. Hello?
Yeah, it's on.
It's on. It is?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
All right. Okay. But the tradition of the asceticism of dishonor involves the dishonoring of the corpse through the breaching of traditional funeral taboos and injunctions. Socrates, Diogenes, and Gosala are all recorded to have wished to avoid any ritual honoring of their corpses. Socrates instructed his friends just to throw his body on the dung. When Diogenes was old and nearing death, Diogenes was a cynic. He ran with dogs right in the Greek form of things. And nearing death, he refused to make any preparations for it. When asked, when you die, who will carry you out to burial? He replied, whoever wants my room. The more primitive Gosala went further in his karmic black magic. He instructed his disciples to desecrate his body upon his death. They were to tie a rope on his left foot, to spit thrice into his face, and to drag his body around the streets of Savatthi, proclaiming that he was not a Jina, an enlightened one, but a cheat and a murderer, and that Mahavira was the only one true Jina. After this, they were to dispose of his body without respect. Even that after his death, Gosala was practicing black karmic magic or vampirism, tempting his rival into proud feelings that would drag down his karmic status and give Gosala one up on him in his next incarnation. There's a lot of material in here like this. But I think probably that there are a lot of practices that were associated with dog duty and ox duty ascetics that aren't mentioned in here, but which presumably were quite well known at the time that the Buddha was speaking. So I think that's why he's saying, you'll be a dog or you'll be in hell if you don't do it right. Similarly, the custom of the beast vow was based on the shaman's ability to transform himself or herself into the shape of an animal ally. The Buddhist text Mahanidesa and Kulanidesa mention vows to live like an elephant, a horse, a cow, a snake, a dog, and others. Beast ascetics were also mentioned in the Majjhima Nikaya and the Dhamma Samgita. Bovine ascetics wear a tail and horns and bray-like bowls. The Indus Valley figures of therianthropic males with horns and tails, which go back in turn to Mesopotamian representations of bullmen, may have represented people who had taken such vows. The Pasataka, in his first stage of training, was obliged to spend a part of every day bellowing like a bull, hoping to transform himself into the Lord's beast.
Into the Lord what?
What?
The Lord what?
Into the Lord's beast.
Lords.
Both animal imitation and shocking behavior are encountered in the bull vow. In the Jainini Brahmana specifics that the enactor of the bull vow should have, or specifies that the enactor of the bull vow should have sexual congress in defiance of all human laws, that is, indiscriminately with forbidden members of his family as well as with others. Diogenes similarly advocated incest as a part of an ideal of complete indifference to social and familial customs. Indian texts also mention dog ascetics who sit like dogs, walk and eat like dogs, sleep in the streets like and among dogs, and who eventually are to acquire the very thought patterns and feelings of dogs. Diogenes the Cynic, or the dog, lived in the streets of Athens among dogs and was called one by the Athenians. In India, every Akori guru was always accompanied by a dog. In Sanskrit drama, a Sanskrit drama refers to a madman who delighted in eating the leavings of a dog. So I think all these associated practices that were well known at the time, I think, that makes the Buddha say this.
Perhaps so. Though I still find it a bit strong to say that the person will be reborn, knowing what the hell realm entails, such extreme suffering. I could see that they lean towards rebirth in the animal realm and to the type of animal they were trying to imitate.
Does that just speak to the power of wrong view? Is this a teaching on how important it is to have right view?
I would think that if a person holds the view himself, again, I don't see that they're inflicting much harm on others, but if they try to propagate this view to others and encourage others to behave like dogs and animals, again, I have to say, I find it a little bit peculiar that, well, maybe if they're teaching that this is the way to a heavenly rebirth or the way to liberation, then it's dangerous. It could be creating extremely unwholesome karma. But if they're just holding it as a private view, as a basis for the behavior, I just don't see that it's severe. Anyway, there are some things that we don't know. Anyway, let us continue. Okay, so this is what the Buddha says, and then when he completes his statement, the dog duty ascetic Sadia suddenly cries out and bursts into tears. And then the Buddha says, the Buddha tells this ascetic Puna, you say I couldn't persuade you. I told you, don't ask me that. Okay, then Sadia speaks up and he says, I'm not crying because the Blessed One has said this about me, but because I have long taken up and practiced this dog-duty asceticism. So maybe he's been practicing it, for 10 years, 15 years, and now he realizes so much of his life has been wasted. Okay, now Saitya asks the same thing about his companion Puna. He says, Puna here has long taken up and practiced the ox-duty asceticism. What will be his destination? What will he get in the future? And again, the Buddha says 3 times, don't ask me that, until Saitya insists. And so after the 3rd time, the Buddha says, well, since you're insisting, I have to answer you. And so then the Buddha says, here someone develops the ox duty fully, uninterruptedly, and he develops the ox habit or ox way of practice fully and uninterruptedly, the ox mind, the ox behavior. And so the breakup of the body after death, what's going to happen to him, but he'll be reborn in the company of the oxen. He'll become an ox himself. But if he holds the view that by this virtue, observance, asceticism, or holy life, I'll become a deity, that is his wrong view. And then with wrong view, there is 2 destinations, hell or the animal realm. And so if he succeeds in his ox-duty asceticism, then it leads him to the oxen. But if he fails, probably by adopting the wrong view, it will lead him to hell. Then in the same way, Puna, the ox-duty ascetic, breaks out in tears. And he also explains that the reason I'm crying is because I have long taken up and practiced this ox-duty asceticism. But then Puna goes on and he says, Venerable Sir, I have confidence in the Blessed One thus, that the Blessed One is capable of teaching me the Dhamma in such a way that I can abandon this ox duty, and that Saitya, the naked dog duty ascetic, can abandon the dog duty practice. So somehow, it's almost like a kind of grace. Suddenly, like Puna's, you say, the seed of faith starts to open up and to awaken, and he develops this trust or confidence in the Buddha. He's willing to, he doesn't close himself off and say, well, if you say I'm going to be reborn as an ox, and Saini is going to be reborn as a dog, I'm not going to listen to you, and he walks off. But suddenly he develops this pasada, this trust, confidence, faith in the Buddha, that the Buddha can teach him, and by listening to the Buddha's teaching, he will see some light of wisdom and begin to practice in the wholesome way. So now the Buddha is going to give him what's the core of the sutta, which is a teaching on the 4 kinds of action, or 4 kinds of karma, that the Buddha says he has directly realized through his abhinya, through his higher knowledge or direct knowledge. Okay, so what are the 4 kinds of karma? First, there is dark karma, dark action with dark result. There is bright action with bright result. There is dark and bright action with dark and bright result. And there is an action or a kind of action that is neither dark nor bright, with neither a dark nor bright result. And this is the action or the karma that leads to the destruction or the ending of karma. Okay, so this is the kind of outline of the teaching, laying out the topics. And now the Buddha is going to expand on this outline by explaining what is meant by each of these types of karma. And so he starts with the dark action with dark result. This is the way the Buddha usually teaches, taking the dark or negative side of the teaching first, then following with the positive or wholesome side. Okay, so then he says, here someone generates an afflictive bodily formation, an afflictive verbal formation, an afflictive mental formation. And the word that's translated formation here is the word sankhara, or actually it's abhisankhara, just basically the same meaning, just the prefix intensifies it a little bit. I think it's sankhara, actually. Yeah, the word sankhara, it comes from the verb karoti, which means to do, and then it has a prefix sam, which has a suggestion of together, bringing together, putting together. And then from the word karoti, the verb karoti, we also get the word kama. You can see it more clearly in the Sanskrit form, karma. And so when the text speaks about generating a formation, what it means really in practical meaning is that one engages in some kind of activity, an activity which is motivated by volition. That is the key factor. And so one intentionally acts in some way, and the act can be either bodily, that's the B, verbal through speech, or mental purely through thinking, feeling, emotions, planning, and so on. And it's called afflictive in the sense that it's an action which intentionally is creating either harm and suffering, either for oneself, for others, or for both oneself and others. So this is what we would normally call unwholesome karma. Somebody is creating some unwholesome karma. Okay, then having generated this formation or having engaged in such activity, having created such volitional activities or performed such volitional activities, he reappears in an afflictive world. What's meant by reappears? He's reborn. Okay, when he has reappeared or been reborn in an afflictive world, then afflictive contacts touch him. And being touched by afflictive contacts, he feels afflictive feelings that are painful, disagreeable, that are exclusively painful, as in the case of the beings in hell, in the hell realm. So this gives us an interesting sequence here. So this is how the actions that we perform, the unwholesome, in this case the unwholesome actions, how they produce their result. The action has a kind of, we call it a moral force to it, an ethical force, which projects us into a particular world. And that world corresponds to the nature of our actions. And the way the karma actually brings about its result is by exposing us to the types of contacts. Exposing us to the types of contacts that correspond to the nature of our original actions. So if we create affliction, willfully for ourselves, for others, or both, those actions are going to build up a potential which gets released by creating situations where the affliction comes back to us. And it does this, sort of the quickest way to do that is by projecting us through the rebirth process into a new world, into a new realm that corresponds to the action. And now look at the sequence that I have here. We have sankharas leading to the world, leading to conflict, to contact, leading to feeling. Does this remind anybody of anything? Excuse me? Yeah, very good, very good. I thought, have you come to this class before? But you seem to know the Dharma well. Yeah, this is, we could say, it's a segment from the standard formula of dependent origination. So we have, the formula dependent origination starts with ignorance, even though that's not mentioned explicitly here, but for somebody to engage in afflictive action, it has to be backed by ignorance. Through ignorance, one acts, and those actions create sankharas. The sankharas, in this case, bring about rebirth into a particular world. But what is the world, after all? But sort of what makes the world accessible to us or available to us? Sort of what plugs us into a world is consciousness and nama-rupa, name and form. And then out of name and form come the 6 sense faculties. And so the reason why we're all sort of plugged into the human world is because we have created the kind of karma which is created or brought about the mind-body complex that is tuned into the human world, or that's adjusted to the human world. And so we experience the human world. If we have the dogs walking on the monastery ground, or the birds, or the chipmunks, or the squirrels, they're experiencing not the human world. Of course, they share the physical world with us, but they're experiencing their world from the standpoint of being an animal. Of course, they have an animal consciousness. But still, they share this physical world with us, and so we say that we're all in this together. But there are other realms that we can't see, touch. Normally we can't see them, touch them. But they exist also, and there are beings who are plugged into them, tuned into them. It's a little bit, to use my simile, it's like a radio with several bands, AM, FM, shortwave band 1, shortwave band 2. If you're on, we have like a radio station, one band on the AM. The animals are also on the AM band. And so, if you tune the dial on the radio, we could get, even though we have our own radio station, like I'm a disc jockey at one radio station, but if I want, I tune it, and I can listen to other radio stations. It's like I can see the animals, hear them, play with them. Of course, we share the same world. But if there are radio stations which are only FM, as long as I'm on the AM band, if I have just an AM radio, I can't get them. And so then I say, they don't exist. Scientific evidence. Go from the left of the AM band to the right of the AM band. No such radio station. It's a WBAI, 99.
91.5.
Excuse me?
Are they 91.5 or 95.5?
99.5.
99. Well, thank you. I just had it on honor to you.
Yeah. Okay, so WBAI, I think it's only FM. You don't get it on AM. So if I'm just working in the AM frequencies, I say, WBAI, what are you, nuts? Doesn't exist.
It's almost like multiple dimensions.
Yeah, they are multiple dimensions. Yeah.
Different frequencies reside on specific dimensions.
Yeah.
It's like that quantum mechanics.
But it's true, there are different dimensions, some of which are very small and can be right next to you.
Yeah.
But our sense bases, our salyatana, are not capable of receiving
Yeah.
that.
Of course, there are like other frequencies, other kinds of ranges of energies, which are part of this particular physical universe, so we can't pick up on with our senses, but we have ways to discover them through instruments and through other types of tests. But the other realms are not even within this physical universe. But if one creates the karma that is tuned into those realms, then one, on passing away, one picks up the mind-body complex, or the consciousness, name and form, that correspond to those realms, then one experiences them. Okay, so here we pick up being reborn in an afflictive world means that one picks up the consciousness, the name and form, and the 6 sense faculties that tune into that world, and so one experiences that world. And if it's strong, unwholesome karma which is bringing its result, then one experiences an afflicted world, just like the beings in hell. And so then the Buddha says, I'm still in paragraph 8, he says, thus a being's reappearance or rebirth is due to a being. In other words, whatever karma one creates, one is reborn through that karma. And so then the next phrase states that explicitly. One reappears or takes rebirth through the actions one has performed. When one has reappeared or taken rebirth, contacts touch one, and so I say beings are the heirs of their actions. And this is called dark action with dark result. So that's the afflictive side. Then the next side can be, or is the unafflictive. Okay, so the non-afflictive, or the bright action with bright result. Here we have the case of someone who generates unafflictive bodily formation, an unafflictive verbal formation, and an unafflictive mental formation. This means the person creates, we say the person engages in wholesome activities, virtuous activities of body, speech, and mind. And these wholesome, virtuous activities create or build up and accumulate the wholesome karma. Okay, so having generated or created these unafflictive volitional activities, the person is reborn in a non-afflictive world. Okay, so in this case, he will acquire or pick up a desirable type of rebirth consciousness, and that will bring into being a kind of well-equipped, well-endowed body and mind, healthy, beautiful, endowed with good qualities. And then when he's reborn in this unafflictive world, unafflictive contacts touch him. So he's touched by pleasant experiences, and being touched by pleasant experiences, he feels unafflictive feelings or pleasant feelings, exclusively pleasant, as in the case of the gods of refulgent glory. These are the deities dwelling in one of the very high realms, the very high planes of existence in the form realm. Okay, so in this case too, the Buddha says a being's rebirth is due to a being. One is reborn through one's actions, and so on. Okay, now we come to the third alternative, and this is what is called dark and bright action with dark and bright result. Okay, and then the text goes on to say, here someone generates a bodily formation that is both afflictive and unafflictive, a verbal formation that's both afflictive and unafflictive, and a mental formation that is both afflictive and unafflictive. So this is the case of somebody who engages in activities that involve a mixture of good and bad, wholesome and unwholesome. Now, like strictly speaking, according to the Abhidhamma way of looking at action, any kind of action has to be either exclusively good or exclusively bad. So if I'm performing an act of generosity or giving, but I'm doing it in order to be praised and admired by others, then from the Abhidhamma standpoint, what they say is that at one moment when I'm performing the giving, at that moment there is a wholesome state of consciousness. But then maybe a few moments later I'm thinking, everybody is going to admire me for this. Isn't this one praising me? Then it's only an unwholesome state of consciousness. So this is like a mixture, some occasions wholesome, some occasions unwholesome. But from the Abhidhamma standpoint, can't have two at the same time. It's a little bit like trying to bring together the positive, in this case it's the positive and positive bars of a magnet. The two will repel each other. So the wholesome and the unwholesome can coexist. That's the Abhidhamma standpoint. But it seems from the Sutta standpoint, the Buddha doesn't use such precisely refined technical language, but speaks in more general terms. So here we can have actions which are both afflictive and unafflictive. So maybe somebody, again, he gives a gift out of a desire for name and fame or praise, or he gives a gift but he scolds the receiver. So there's both, you give something but you admonish the receiver and put him down with some cutting remark. Anybody else think of some examples? Mixture of wholesome and unwholesome.
I mean, most people in life, are a mixture.
Yeah, I think that's really
It's
true.
just generally, it's not necessarily a thing of one discrete action, but, somebody could, their basic through line is, they're a decent Joe. But maybe once they stole something from the candy store when they were 10, or, they fibbed about something, or they cut class, or not anything really horrible necessarily, it's not horrible. But, they've done a few unwholesome things in their life.
Yeah, I think most people's lives are a mixture of wholesome and unwholesome.
It doesn't have to be awful.
Maybe if you kill a killer in order to save the victim, so you're killing somebody and saving somebody at the same time.
Well, that's an interesting example. Any other instances? My imagination is a little poor today.
Well, in politics, one can, if you want to get some good legislation passed, twist other people's arms and threaten them with taking things away from them if that's what you want to do.
Well, I didn't quite catch
In
it.
politics,
Yeah.
a person who wants legislation passed may threaten people who wouldn't vote for him, or give them bribes in order to get something positive done. So bribing somebody would be unwholesome, but the end result might be positive.
Usually I think when people get bribes, it's they want to get some benefit for themselves rather than to help others.
It was on, speaking.
But actually there are all types of ethical dilemmas in everyday life. Sometimes one has to choose between different alternatives. But actually that's a case where, maybe that's not exactly the case that I'm trying to think of, where there's a conflict of motives, ethical motives. Because there is actually one has to decide according to what you call the sense of a higher conscience. Yep.
To think of the life of somebody like Lyndon Johnson.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, on the one hand, he's launching the war on poverty, which has all kinds of And he thinks that in order to get Republican support for his programs, he has to prosecute the Vietnam War and so on. And he's bullying people in unbelievable ways. The man just, people were just completely stunned after talks with Lyndon Johnson. It's like he made faith. There's no one who excelled in arm twisting the way that Johnson did.
Yeah, okay, anyway, so there's these cases of mixtures of the wholesome and the unwholesome. Okay, if somebody has this mixture of the wholesome and unwholesome, then he's reborn in the world, which is both afflictive and unafflictive. When he's reborn there, then he's exposed to both kinds of contacts, and he experiences both kinds of feelings. And that is like the case of human beings, some of the devas, I guess the world of the gods, it's not always entirely blissful. In the world of, maybe you don't know, but in the world of the Tavatimsa devas, they are always subjected to attacks by the asuras.
The devas started it with the potion of immortality.
Who is this?
The devas started that one.
But anyway, they get it. Sometimes they're frightened and have to run away from the battle with the asuras. And some beings in the lower worlds. So even animals, we could say, have a mixture of pleasure and pain. I mean, some animals have much more pleasure than pain. You have cats and dogs living in luxury apartments on Fifth Avenue. They get the top quality food. They have a nice bed to sleep on. When they get sick, their owner will take them to a top quality veterinarian, restore them to health. When it's winter, the owners will put on a sweater purchased from Lord and Taylor. What's more like, Lord and Taylor is just middle class.
Neiman Marcus.
Neiman Marcus, that's the top.
It's pretty expensive, I think.
And they make sweaters for dogs.
I'm sure they do.
Maybe some dogs have these collar put wrapped on the neck. Collar studded with jewels. Of course, the dog doesn't even appreciate that. Maybe it's just a collar. And then the human being, it's not a joking matter, but they're living, many living out in the streets during the cold winter, no warm clothing, difficulty getting food, sometimes you see people standing on the busy roads with a sign, homeless and hungry, please help me. Okay, so this case, a being's reappearance, again, it's due to a being when it's reborn through one's own actions. Okay, now we come to the fourth case. And this is the action that is neither dark nor bright, with neither dark nor bright result, action that leads to the destruction, or you could say the fading out of action. Or maybe more precisely, it's the action that leads to the end of karma, the end of creating more karma. And so what is this action? It's here stated as the volition for abandoning the kind of action that is dark with dark result, and the volition for abandoning the kind of action that is bright with bright result, and the volition for abandoning the kind of action that is dark and bright with dark and bright result. That is called the action that is neither dark nor bright, with neither dark nor bright result, the action that leads to the end of karma. So these are the four kinds of action, four kinds of karma that the Buddha has proclaimed through his realization with direct knowledge. Now this fourth kind, You just have to clarify a point. It's called karma, that or action that's neither dark nor bright, with neither dark nor bright result. But this is because the two words that are being used here, dark and bright, are used with reference to actions within the round of rebirth, actions that relate to birth and death or to samsara. So it's called dark, is in Pali it's kanha. And what is bright, in Pali it's sukha. And so when you hear about the action that's neither dark nor bright, the way it's described, it might not seem to our ears very attractive. It seems maybe just like a bland, neutral gray, or like, turning on the radio, you get neither disturbing, vituperative speech, or pleasant or soft chamber music, but you just get the static sound. But that is because the term bright is used to represent simply bright action that will bring one back into the samsara, into the round of birth and death. But this kind of action, looked at from another point of view, is brighter than the normal bright action. It's not, the word sukha isn't used, but you could say that this is the pabasara action, which means the luminous action, or in the Chinese this would be guangming, bright, luminous. Because this is the action that comes from wisdom, from panya, from the supramundane or world-transcending wisdom. And it's the action that liberates one from the cycle of birth and death. And so it has a brighter, even more blissful result, which is the attainment of nirvana. And there's some other suttas that come in Anguttara Nikaya that explain what this particular type of action is. They're not mentioned in this sutta. I think I mentioned them in the note here. But what are they?
I already looked at the note last night.
Anyway, if you don't look at the note, it's hard to know what they are. Would anybody want to take a guess? Okay, no guesses, and I'll say. I'll give the answer myself. It's the volition involved in cultivating the Noble Eightfold Path, or the volition involved in cultivating the 7 factors of enlightenment. So when one is practicing the Noble Eightfold Path at, we could say, the ordinary day-to-day level, that is creating wholesome karma or bright karma that will have a bright result. And the same with cultivating the 7 factors of enlightenment as a kind of daily practice. But when the Noble Eightfold Path and the 7 factors of enlightenment gain in power and strength, so that they bring the breakthrough to the ultimate truth, to the realization of Nibbana, then that breakthrough is neither dark or bright karma, but it is that experience of awakening, penetration, realization of the ultimate truth that dismantles or takes apart the chains of karmic causation, so that one becomes free from the bonds of karma, the bondage of karma. Okay, so this is the Buddha's discourse. And now when the Buddha finishes his discourse, two interesting things happen. First, paragraph 12, Puna, the one who was which one? I always get them wrong. He was the ox ascetic. He says to the Buddha, magnificent Bhante, you've made the Dharma clear to me in many ways. Then he says, from today, let the Blessed One remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge from life. So that's the first thing that happens. Then the second thing happens to Sanya, the naked dog-duty ascetic. He says to the Buddha, magnificent Bhante, you've made the Dharma clear to me in many ways. Then he says, I go to the Buddha for refuge, the Dhamma for refuge, the Sangha for refuge. Then he says, I want to receive the going forth under the Buddha, and I want to receive the full admission or full ordination. In other words, he's asking to be ordained as a monk. Now this is interesting, dramatically, from 2 points of view. Wonder if anybody have any idea why this should be, first I say, a little bit strange. Why Puna should ask for just to become a lay follower, and Sanya asks to become a monk. Two reasons why it's a little strange to me.
Why? Because you think Punya may be a relative?
That is one reason, yeah. Puna is the relative of the Buddha, and also at the beginning, when they're having the initial discussion, Puna is the one who says, I have such confidence in the Buddha. How does it go? He says, Venerable Sir, I have such confidence in the Blessed One, thus that you are capable of teaching me the Dhamma in such a way that I could give up the ox duty asceticism, and Sangha can give up his dog duty asceticism. So Puna is the one who gains this confidence first and speaks up. Yet he just wants to remain a lay follower, and Sangha wants to go forth and become a monk. Another reason why it's a bit strange to me.
Is this Punya the one who eventually become a monk and then ask for the missionary?
No. First that's Puna with the dot, I believe it's the one with the retroflex and not the nya, but the dot under the ends. Puna. So Puna means full, and Punya means merit or meritorious. Yeah, that's Puna.
Yeah, I have a hunch about the reason. The ox duty ascetic was probably on a higher social scale in India at the time because everyone honors cows, right? The dog duty ascetic is probably lower down, so it's a greater active conversion for Sanya than it is for Puna, I think.
That's an interesting observation. I wasn't thinking of it from that angle. There could be some truth in that, because especially the Brahmins would love, They didn't like dogs, and I think it was considered even contaminating for a Brahmin to come into physical contact with a dog.
Well, both the Dogdu ascetic probably was intentionally dishonoring himself much more than the Oxduty ascetic was. And there's a doctrine that gets eventually into Tantric Buddhism, right, of intentional dishonoring, because the idea is if you dishonor yourself, then you're free of pride and free of involvement. And so it's supposed to be a means of purification to intentionally debase yourself or appear to debase yourself.
Yeah.
Things like shit-eating. Like
Yeah.
ascetics did.
Yeah, I don't know to what extent those ideas were already in circulation at the time of the Buddha.
Well, this book has a chapter on it. I'd like to see.
I'll have to get the title.
Circulation. Okay, yeah.
But I have something else in mind. Why it's a little strange Buddha should ask to become a householder while Sanya becomes a monk. It should be fairly obvious, the answer to this. I'm sure you know it already. It just hasn't come formulated consciously in your mind. Somebody take a guess.
Well, I guess two possible reasons. One is that Sanya has a very tough, well, I actually admire him to have that tenacity, to go through that practice. So he has that inclination to lead a ascetic life. That's one guess. The second guess is that I'm guessing that Sanya may be of the lowest class of the society, the untouchable. Therefore, maybe becoming a monk is easier for him than becoming a householder.
Again, that's interesting, but I didn't think of it from that angle. There should be an answer. To me, it's fairly obvious. What is a bit puzzling? Why this is puzzling? Okay, I won't hold you in suspense any longer. Punya says that he has been long practicing this ox duty asceticism. So he's been living as an ascetic for a long time, following a kind of miserable way of life, the degrading way of life. So if you're already an ascetic, why not just step off, cross over into another way of ascetic life by becoming a Buddhist monk? What is he going to do now after living a long time as imitating the behavior of an ox? Is he going to go back to the household life, buy a set of, what are the fancy suits that the men wear? Brooks Brothers, are they around? Excuse me? They're still there?
Yeah.
Brooks Brothers suit to get himself a Mercedes and find a nice girl and get married and buy a nice house in the countryside and live comfortably because the Buddha converted him away from his ascetic practice. I mean, he's already living a very tough life, so just follow the middle way, man, and just become a Buddhist monk.
But it just goes to show it's like people. You never know about people. And the sutras accurately reflect that.
But isn't this passing from ascetic practice back into household life quite a typical thing? I mean, that's what the 5 monks accused the Buddha of doing, and in the Nivapa Sutta talks about the ascetics who do this ascetic practice and they don't do it right, so they revert to the lay life.
Yeah.
Like, I can completely imagine he would think, oh, well, this was worthless, now I'm going to go enjoy myself for a while. Like, it seems quite normal to me, having seen people do that. It doesn't seem puzzling at all to me.
Yeah, anyway,
I would guess it is followed like the order of paragraph 11. First, he abandoned dark action with dark result as a lay person that can be achieved, and then he is going for some bright action and bright result.
Maybe, okay. Okay, anyways, the facts are stated here, the explanations are given. Okay, so now when Sanya makes this request to be admitted into the Buddhist order, first the Buddha explains what's the general procedure. He says one who formerly belonged to another sect, who is following another kind of spiritual system, and wants to become a monk in this Dhamma and discipline, lives on probation for 4 months. Actually, what the commentary says, I don't know whether this is true or not, but the commentary says that he actually becomes a novice monk, a samanera, for 4 months. But if we just take the text of the sutta, he doesn't get that much, but he lives on probation, which means that he becomes something like what we call nowadays anagarika. Like he might wear white, special kind of white clothing, or maybe even dyed, ochre dyed clothes, but not in the cut of a monastic robe. And he lives at the monastery or a hermitage, and he serves the monks, looks after them, learns the monastic way of life. It's a way of testing him to make sure that he's sincere. Otherwise, if you get somebody converting from another system to Buddhism and then becomes a monk, then he gets ordained very quickly, and then if he becomes discouraged, disillusioned, gives it up, then it reflects badly on the Buddhist order. Just thinking of Thailand, where they come in and out like people going through the turnstile at the subway station. Okay, at the end of the 4 months, if the monks are satisfied with him, then they will give him the ordination. But the Buddha says, but with me, I recognize individual differences in this matter. This means that the Buddha, because he's the founder of the teaching, and because he has this ability to see deeply into the minds and hearts of others, he can make his own decisions about who is going to be ordained. And so then Sanya says, if those who formerly belonged to another sect wish to go forth in this Dhamma discipline, live on probation for 4 months, and then when the monks are satisfied with them, they give them the ordination. Then I will live on probation for 4 years, and if the monks are satisfied with me at the end of 4 years, then they can give me the ordination. Well, that seems to take 4 years. Okay, this is what Sanya says, but the Buddha must have used his special prerogative to give Sanya the ordination immediately, or to recommend him for the ordination. And so Sanya received the going forth, that's the novice ordination under the Buddha, and he received full admission into the order of bhikkhus. Then, not long after his full admission, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, and resolute, now he's the Venerable Sanya, realized for himself with direct knowledge, here and now, the supreme goal of the holy life, and he entered upon it, and he dwelt in it. And he directly knew birth is finished, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done. There is no coming back to any state of being. And in this way, the Venerable Sanya became one of the Arahats. So that's a kind of grand conclusion to the sutta. So you must have had especially good, maybe this is an explanation, that Sanya would have had the supporting conditions, from previous lives, even to become an arhat. And so there was this little layer of delusion covering up his mind, because of which he first became the dog duty ascetic. And once that was broken through, then all of his good roots could flourish. Whereas maybe Punya didn't have such good roots. And so he still had to plant wholesome roots under Buddha Gautama by becoming a lay disciple and then engaging in wholesome, meritorious deeds. Maybe later in this life or in some future life, his good seeds will have the opportunity to ripen. Okay, any questions?
Why Pandit, does the Buddha not answer the question of Punya directly when he's asked? Why does he have to answer or ask 3 times?
Yeah, I think it's a way to show, maybe 2 ways to look at that. One of these is because he doesn't want to tell Punya the truth, or Sanya the truth. Because if he does so, he thinks that the consequences will be so dreadful that it will cause great distress to him. So I would think, in the normal way of things, the Buddha would speak the truth, tell him straight off. So this brings in the other reason, is that the Buddha, in a way, is sort of establishing conditions for his spirit of inquiry to get stronger. If the Buddha just gives the answer right off, even though these ascetics will be distressed, but they won't be motivated to inquire more deeply into what they can do to correct their course.
So he's testing their motivation.
Exactly, to strengthening their motivation, yeah. Okay, this is one question or 2?
It's 2 questions.
Okay, somebody says, you have the statement of being's reappearance is due to a being. Isn't this another way of saying that craving is what propels one into rebirth, reappearance and rebirth? Yeah, craving is, you could say, the general force behind it, since it's craving that keeps one connected or tied to the round of birth and death. But it's the karma